Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. Now if you've watched my channel recently you'll have seen that I've made a replacement cape for a vintage 12-inch Darth Vader. And another of the figures that I picked up recently was the vintage 12-inch Boba Fett, as you can see here on the right. Now more often than not when you pick up with these they are missing all the parts, and I was lucky with this Boba Fett that he did come with his belt, but as you can see he is missing his cape, and that is what we are going to cover today, and I'm going to show you how to make a replacement cape for a vintage 12-inch Boba Fett from Kenner. Now the first thing I need to do is to work out how to make a pattern for this, so I put out a request on my Facebook page to see if anyone had an original cape that they could take some photos of for me on a gridded background or something with a ruler next to it, and Gary from Geek Force very kindly sent over some photos of the cape that came with his figure, and from that I took those into Photoshop, and with a little bit of work I was able to work out the exact size the cape should have been and then make a pattern. And you can see here this is the pattern that I made. It's a very simple pattern because essentially it's an oblong with a few little seams that need to be sewn around the edge and then some elastic attached to the corners. Now I've already made a prototype of this cape because generally before I like to film what I'm going to show you I make a prototype version, and you can see here my prototype. Now I went down to the local haberdashery shop that we have here and I've sort of struggled to find any fabric that was that good. This is, as you can see, a little bit too green. The finish of it's not too bad, it's a sort of light cotton, but it really is too green. So I did buy some of that. It only cost 75p for a small amount, but it's not really good enough. So I had a hunt now to try and find something better, and if you've seen my Vader cape you'll know that that was made out of a t-shirt, and again t-shirts seem to be the right sort of thing to go for. So I picked up this t-shirt off eBay. Now I bought extra large because I thought it would give me a nice lot of material if I ever wanted to use it again, and this was called Army Green. Now it may be slightly too light still, but it's still a good match actually for the armour colour on Fett there, and much better than the green that I bought. You can see the green I bought, it really is too sort of perfect green, and the weight of this material is pretty nice. So if you want to make one of these capes yourself I would suggest trying to find a cheap t-shirt and use the material out of that. This t-shirt cost me £2.50 including postage, and I should be able to make a lot of stuff out of it, so it's well worth getting. So let's get on with making the cape. This pattern that I've created is available on toy-polloi.com, so go there and download that. It is free, and print it out at 100%, which will be 300 dpi, and you'll end up with a little bit of paper like this. Now there are two grey lines on it, cut around the outer grey line because the inner grey line is just there to show you how much to fold in for the hem around the edge of it. So I placed this just on the corner of this t-shirt, and I'm going to roughly cut out an oblong piece of this before we pin it on and cut it out properly. It's just easier to cut out a small section of t-shirt rather than working on the whole thing. As you can see I can cut this quite roughly because it really doesn't matter what the edges are like at this stage. So we just cut that out and then we can mark it up properly. I've now got the rough section of fabric cut out. I'm now going to carefully pin the pattern onto the fabric just in a few places so that we can get it sort of nicely laid flat, and then once it's pinned in place I will cut the shape out properly and neatly to make sure that we have the edges as neat as I possibly can. So I'm just going to pin this in place just in a few places like so, maybe a couple along the edge as well. Like that. Now that that's all neatly pinned out, I'm now going to get my scissors and carefully cut around this pattern and make sure that I do it as neat as I possibly can. And once that's cut out we can now remove the pins and take the pattern off the fabric. We should be left with a nice neat piece of green cloth that we can start work on. And there we have it. It's pretty neat. Looks like a good place to start. Now what we need to do is to sew some hems all around the edge of this cloth. So what we're going to do is fold over the 5mm that I had marked on the pattern. You'll see that there's a little 5mm bit. So we're going to fold that over and I'm going to pin that in place before I get to sew it. So just a few pins all along the edge to hold a 5mm turned over bit of fabric. Now I only do one side at a time just because I find I end up getting stuck with the pins all the time. So I'm just going to do one bit and I'm going to sew this and then I'll do the other side. So the next thing we need to do is find some cotton. Now I've gone into Mrs. Toy-Polloi's sort of cotton selection. She has a green that's a pretty good match, so we're going to use that to do the sewing. Let's get that bit ready. So now it's time to sew. I'm not the best sewer as you've seen in my previous videos, but it's good enough to get this sort of hemming done. It takes me a little while. I'm sure other people will be able to sew better, and if you had a sewing machine, even quicker still. And here we have that first side hemmed. As you can see, it doesn't look too bad. My stitching is not great, but because the cotton is a fairly good match for the actual cloth, you can't really see that. So we now have to do the same on the other side. We'll do the two ends next, but let's get both of the long edges done first. So again, we're going to pin all the way along this one edge, and I will sew along as well and get that sorted. So let's pin first. Now we have two sides done and it's starting to look more like a cape. So the next one to do is one of the other shorter edges. We're just going to do the bottom edge to start with. And again, I'm going to fold that over and hem it. On the top edge is when it starts to get a bit more complicated because we have to start dealing with bits of elastic. But for now, we'll do all of the easy bits first. So I'm just going to pin this along the bottom about 5mm in and then we can get on and get the top stuff done with all of the elastic and the finishing touches. Now we have those three edges hemmed, it's just the top edge to do, and for that we also need a bit of elastic. Now I've seen a few different versions of this cape. Some have a loop on either side, one has a big loop. I'm going to go for the most common one I've seen, which is one that has a loop on either side. So I bought some thin elastic. Now this is about 3mm flat black elastic. You can pick this up off eBay. I think I bought a couple of meters for no more than £1 or so, and it's very useful to have if you're fixing toys. So what we're going to do is we need to fold over a loop which is about that long. Let me just show you how long that is on here. That is about 8cm long. So we're going to cut off an 8cm length. We need two of these, so let's cut off two 8cm lengths like so. And now these need to be sewn into the top corners of the little cape that we're making here. They need to go like so, but we've also got to fold everything over. So we're going to fold this over and pin it and pin the elastic in place, and then we'll sew along and sew the elastic as well at the same time. So it's a little bit more fiddly just because there's lots of sort of elements to hold together. So I'm just going to put those in there, fold over the top, and now hopefully you'll have to pin that as well at the same time. And once we start sewing, it should get a little bit easier. There we go, that's one corner pinned. And I should be able to then sew along and we'll get all of this sewn into place. So we can pin the other one as well. Just going to get a pin, fold the bit of elastic over. Like so. Put it in the corner and then fold the hem over the top of it. And we can just pin that one in place as well. I should be able to do that with just those two pins actually. So let's get sewing and we'll see if we can get this all finished off. So again, I've got some green thread. We'll just sew this as we go. And this is what we should end up with. You have the cape with two hoops of plastic at the sort of top corners of the cape. And as you can see, this is my prototype. So it looks pretty good compared to that. The prototype, obviously, not the greatest of materials. This one, though, is quite a nice sort of material. It's got the quite sort of old feel to it. The t-shirt fabric is great for that because it sort of hangs quite nicely, a lot like the old fabric did on Boba Fett. So let's get this onto the figure and we'll see what he looks like with the cape in place. And here we have Boba Fett with his cape in place. Now, I've seen a few different ways of hanging the cape on Boba Fett, so there doesn't seem to be a particular standard way of doing it. I've done it in the most common way I've seen online, which is with both straps hung over one shoulder. So if we pick him up and turn him round, you can see that the cape hangs quite nicely. It's about the right length, and the fabric match is not too bad. It might have been better to get a slightly darker fabric. It's very hard to tell when you're buying a t-shirt online. This is the army green colour, and it is an army green colour. If maybe a little bit darker would have done better, but as you can see, that doesn't actually look too bad. It looks like it should fit quite nicely with the rest of the figure. As I mentioned before, you can get the pattern for this off toy-polloi.com. Just go there. There are plenty of other files to download, and if you want to spend some money on some of the custom ones I've done, then please do that. This file is for free, so please go ahead and use it to make replacement capes for your vintage Star Wars figures and your vintage Boba Fett. You will also be able to get the PDF for Darth Vader's cape, as you can see here on the left. So this isn't really the most complicated of capes to make. It does take about 20 minutes to do, but really is worth it because without the cape, Boba Fett does look a little bit odd. I'm going to work on some other things for Boba Fett because I know he's still missing the Wookiee scalps off one side, so I will work out how to make those and cover those in another video. And I hope this has been of interest to you, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow Toy Polloi on Twitter and Facebook.